Season 1, Episode 6, The Eye. This is the heist. The heist itself. And how irrelevant the heist itself is. And it's so funny, isn't it? Star Wars has never shied away from real-life symbolic parallels, but those hats at the beginning is probably the most on-the-nose I've ever seen them do anything ever. Also, there's this wonderful moment. They even emphasize it. Almost every time Cassian's been handed a drink, this entire show. Quick sniff, and then he takes a drink. It's really quiet. And it's always in the background. But this one time, the camera's right up in his face. Why? Because he's handed the drink, and he just takes it. He doesn't sniff it. That is the power of quality storytelling right there. That is the power of writer factor. I know I talk about this often, so forgive me for the repetition. Writer factor, it's my own terminology, is about how much we have trust in the creators of a fictional work. I say writer because it's usually down to writing, but you get the idea, right? How much can we look at something and say, is this a mistake? Or is this foreshadowing? I'll try to avoid spoilers, but like if I walk into a room, I hesitate when I walk into the room. And then I keep going. Does that mean anything? Am I sensing something? Am I a Jedi? Am I a mage who feels the force field that is the trap in this room? Is that foreshadowing? Is that characterization? Or is it just someone who made a mistake? The higher you have... I'm sorry, this is the wrong song for this. The higher you have a writer factor, the more you can trust that that's deliberate. That it's an intentional point to try and actually make something happen. Character, plot, foreshadowing, intonation, and development. And this show has such a high writer factor. I have not seen a show like this. In fact, I've only covered 4 shows in my life that are at this level of writer factor for me. And you're going to make fun of me for it. I don't give a crap. Justified, My Little Pony, go ahead, get it out of your system, Arcane, and Andor. These are the 4 highest quality shows I've ever covered in my life. And it's worth noting, I've analyzed all 4 of these. In shows like these, little bits like that, that's very deliberate. It implies so much, and it perfectly sets up a lot of the rest of the episode. Sorry, I do now need to actually specify G4 MLP, because now there's there was always multiple MLP shows, but you get it. I'm sure several of you could think of shows that aspire to this level of quality as well. And I will freely admit that the reason my list is so small is because I haven't analyzed that many shows. I love Rebels, but that show has issues. I love Clone Wars, but that show has issues. I love Star Trek, but all those shows have issues. But these 4? Nemec is weirdly insulting to Cassian here. Cassian looks angry about it, too. But he actually takes it in stride pretty well, probably because he understands that Nemec is personally insulted by the fact that he's just a hired gun. Because Nemec is probably the biggest true believer of all of them, even more than Vel over there, with the possible exception of Luthen. But there's this wonderful bit where Cassian talks back to them. They don't care enough. You're wrong about one thing. The Empire doesn't care enough to learn. They don't have to. You mean nothing to them. And his response is, oh yeah? Oh yeah? They're going to learn about me soon. And his response is, you need to be careful what you wish for. And it's absolutely fantastic, because Cassian understands what it's like to draw attention to himself. Although he didn't draw attention from the Empire, did he? He drew attention from the Rent-A-Cops, and that still caused death and damages. Caused him to have to abandon his entire life. He still doesn't know the fate of his mother. He also consistently goes out of his way to comfort Nemec twice. Twice during this conversation, he is still a leader. He still is there for him, right? He provides that person to talk to. Cut to the commandant. Yeah, that's true. We still, as of this moment, we don't know her fate. Sorry, the proper emphasis. We don't know her fate. The Aldani people, we put a number of the options on the table, and they just can't choose amongst them. They'd rather lose than suffer this, and they'd rather suffer than accept this. They've spent... They've spent 12 years oppressing these people. 12 years. Do you remember earlier the ISB director, Perdigaz, actually specifically said, no, I want specifics. Right? We'll increase surveillance. Okay, but what are you doing? What are you specifically doing? The episode follows through on this exact same mentality by telling us specifics. It's easy and weirdly normal in fiction to just say, oh yeah, we're destroying their culture. The Commandant lays out exactly one of the ways they're doing this. So we offer them a transport so that they can do this 10-day journey. You ever walked for 10 days before? We offer them a transport. They say no, of course. So we strategically have placed rest stops along the way with cheap drinks and comfortable seats. Oh my God, what is wrong with you people? This is time and effort and resources being dedicated to nothing. All they're doing is culturally assassinating these people. That's all they're doing. And I realized after a minute why they were doing it, because I sat here trying to wrap my brain around what a colossal waste of resources this is. Oh, I'm sorry. Obviously, the moral evil on display is self-apparent, but usually people do evil things for a reason. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out why. What's the benefit? What's the point? What's the purpose? And then I realized it. Because then we have the engineer right here and the commandant right here. And what do? They reach down for their glass and drink from them. Same glass, same general uniform, same style of drink, same motion. Synced exactly like each other. Because that's exactly what the Galactic Empire wants. It wants McDonald's. And I know that sounds strange because you think I'm being insulting to McDonald's, and you're wrong. McDonald's is not bad food. I know that sounds like a strange statement, but it's true. You know what McDonald's is? It's conformed. It's normal. It's standardized. You go to a McDonald's in Pennsylvania, you go to McDonald's in California. Those are several thousand miles apart. They're going to be the same. That's what the Galactic Empire wants. That's what this is all about. Flatten everything to the same shade of gray. Now you're probably thinking, okay, I kind of understand that. Why do people go along with it? Why do people promote it? Actually, that's really obvious too. I'm going to say something weird. People like this Commandant, I mean this. I don't think he would be okay with just gunning these people down. With just mass murdering these people. In fact, I think a lot of people in the Galactic Empire would not be okay with just mass murdering people. So you remember, you've really got to remember, this system of oppression oppresses everyone in the system, top to bottom. Think about that. Yeah, exactly. This is sanitized. This is clean. All we're doing is changing them into something more standardized, useful. It plays on people. It plays on inherent biases. It plays on people's desire to not have things be too messy or too horrible. Remember the age. I hate to keep pointing this out, but remember the age of these people. This man has gray hair. He was probably a full adult during the Clone Wars. Why is this relevant? You need to remember that a lot of people who grew up in the Clone Wars remember what a colossal mess the Clone Wars was. And yes, something occurred to me as I was watching this episode, which has never actually occurred to me before. And I can't believe I've never seen this before. The Clone Wars was a beautiful trap for the Jedi. We've talked about this many times. We just covered this in Season 7 of the Clone Wars show. It was designed to throw thousands and thousands of ships and troops and lives all down the gutter to kill off the Jedi. But it was also a mess. The Clone Wars caused devastation on a galactic scale. It was one of the most large-scale, unprecedentedly violent and damaging wars in the history of the galaxy. Yeah, it flattened the galaxy. Do you know how many people want peace after that? Do you know how many people want to get away from damage and wars and suffering and fighting and starving and shortages? So we go ahead. We're not going to kill off these people. We're going to convert them, bit by bit, into something we can use. And that sits in the minds of these people better. Even people who are, let's call it what it is, evil. But evil's a gradient, isn't it? People like this Commandant are like the poster child for the fat bastard, and yet he shows several signs throughout this episode. Great job to the guest star, by the way. He's only in one episode. He does a really, really good job here. He does so much good work. The actor does so much good work to demonstrate what kind of person would go along with all of this. In fact, he serves as perfect parallel to Mon Mothma's husband. Different level, of course, different tier of society. Yeah, safe streets and a chicken in every pot. I remember that. So Trihexia asked something. How is setting out way stations killing their culture? Okay. What is their culture? I'm just going to answer myself here. Their culture is they make mass pilgrimages to this one spot, which is a sacred valley to these people. And then they view this beatific event that happens every 3 years like clockwork. That's their culture. That right there. That's culture. There's ritual. There's probably religion involved. Doesn't matter. That's culture. So they make the event harder or less likely to happen. And then they put way stations on the path, strategically placed to discourage people from even making the pilgrimage. Is it really worth it? It's another 6 days of walking just to see some pretty lights. Or I could go take a settle and have some cheap drinks and a comfortable seat. The Commandant lays it all out. Originally, it was 15,000 people that would show up. Now it's closer to 500. People have stopped making the journey. That's why that's cultural assassination. Forgive me for sounding angry here. This probably comes across as weird. I have said many times I don't really have much of a culture as an individual, since I've rejected so much of mine. And further to the point, I'm very anti-traditionalist. But what you may also know about me is I'm very high respect. And if you told me, if you were a good friend of mine, if Rax told me right now, to my face, hey, every 3 years, I want to go and I want to light a fire on my Sega Genesis that I've got. And it reminds me of the such and such, and it is the what-you-fig, and it doesn't matter. The reasons don't matter. It's important to him. Done. I got your back, buddy. Because that's important to you, and that's the part that matters. Forgive me. That's how you kill culture. You prevent people from doing those things. You remove that knowledge. Remember what we just talked about last episode? Removing knowledge from the equation. And yeah, the fact that they offer them these stupid furs. Dude throws it on the fire. I actually like that. That got a cheer out of me. I also love the... I'm sorry, this is skipping ahead a little bit, but I love the Aldani Elder. I forget how he phrased it, but he says something along the lines of the hands of our ghosts are strong and long-lived, or something like that. And, you know, and then, of course, Gorn says... He says, thank you for the gift. And the guy actually looks at him for a second. Like, he knows. The Elder processed that he lied there. And the engineer, do they know this will be the last time they'll be allowed up here? Yeah, because they're about to set up a military base. And I know what you're thinking. Why? Oh, that's the best part. Because, again, this is all deliberate. They can set up a military base anywhere. A new airfield, they have a planet to work with. And even in Star Wars, planets are big. But that's the point, is that it has to be here. After all, they've already got the Imperial Festival they've been doing. Remember that? Showcasing that further down the line. It's down there. We've already got plenty of people invested. They'll have that next year. My actual notes. I have very few notes for this section because it stuck so strongly in my memory. The only thing I wrote in my notes was, what the crap is wrong with you? That's all I wrote down. So, can I share just how weird it is, how tense I was while watching this? The build-up. It's so quiet. There's very little going on, very little motion, a lot of static shots with the camera. Wonderful direction. Very, very quiet music, or no music at all. This is also when he found out that Terraman was a stormtrooper. You know, the guy who's been drilling them on military protocol and how to talk and how to hold yourself. You remember that last episode? You walk with purpose. You walk like you're meant to be here. Like you know what you're doing, the certainty of it. That also reminded me of another interesting tidbit. We haven't seen stormtroopers yet, have we? Of all of the galactic might of the Galactic Empire we've seen so far, it's been boiled down to 3 TIE fighters. One single flight, that's it, that's all. And that flight was an existential threat. No stormtroopers, just regulars. Now, some of you are probably like, but if I may, anybody who knows me knows that something I miss about very early EU was the idea that the stormtroopers were the big boys, that they were the elite, that they were the stuff you bring in, you know, when you really mean it, right? That the regulars filled in the rest of the gap, that the regular were the chaff, right? The 1 week training course and all that kind of stuff. And I've always preferred the idea that the stormtroopers are the heavies, that they're the ones with the skill and the gear and the equipment and the training and the experience. I find myself wondering if this show is going to approach it like that, because we've seen a fairly large amount of Imperial military, especially in this episode. But no stormtroopers. Can I say one other thing? Yeah, no kidding, Roxanne. Yeah, New Hope didn't help. There's this moment where we see the first, I forget what he called it. Nemec actually is like shards of glass that come through the atmosphere and melt or something like that. But he mentions, we see the first meteor, right? I know it's not literally. Don't. And can I just say that there's one thing that Star Wars has nailed literally from day one. I wish I could remember his name. I meant to look it up, but I didn't have time. There was this, I was actually a team of gentlemen, but there's one person in particular who was like responsible for the sound of Star Wars. Some of you probably are aware of this, because the sound design in Star Wars has always been amazing. Literally, since A New Hope. Ben Burtt. That's actually the guy I was thinking of. The sound design in Star Wars has always been amazing, and a lot of people have literally built careers off of studying what they made up off the Christmas special isn't Star Wars. That's like saying that the CDI games are Zelda games. You're just wrong. But it's fascinating how much effort is put into making this sound exactly as awesome as it should. And then the Commandant has trouble putting on his uniform. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, he's fat. Yeah. I'm actually scared to talk about this scene because I'm afraid that people will misinterpret me on this. But it's amazing how much this scene generated sympathy for the Commandant. The guy committing cultural genocide on an organized and mass scale for 12 years. What? But it does. Something Star Wars does too often is it gives us... Actually, sorry, let me walk that sentence back. Something fiction does too often is it gives us villains like Admiral Trench back in Clone Wars. You remember him? Remember him? Yes. Yes, quiet, quiet. You know, that's the kind of villain we usually get in fiction. Someone who is so overtly, obviously evil that it effectively, and because this is what it's actually doing, it's dehumanizing them. It is removing them from being a character and turning them into something that we can then mentally process as an acceptable target. Yes, I realize how horrible that sounds to say that out loud, but there's a value in doing that, right? A lot of fiction will actually do both at the same time. I hate to go back to the classics, but Dragon Age Origins has the Darkspawn, but then it has villains, characters, individuals who actually go out of their way to be characters. Have you ever noticed just how often characterizing villains is usually portrayed as making them more sympathetic or making them more understandable or making them softer or making them grayer? I think that's a little bit misleading, just a little bit, because it always skips over the important part. The Commandant is a villain. The Bloody Baron in Witcher 3 is a villain. These people being fleshed out are not any less villainous. They're just more characters. There's more depth there. There's more layers there. There's more of a person there. If anything, it makes them worse in several ways than someone who's just going and nothing else. And so we see the Commandant, who is not exactly a good father. Whoa, 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 that's going to get me copy wrong. I didn't realize we'd gone that far in the playlist already. My apologies. I've been talking too long. Let's scooch up here. That's not going to work. Damn it, I need another playlist. I feel like I've been repeating songs too much. I guess I have been. Let's go here. Aeolus Blackmore. That man deserved to die. Then he did. The way he talks about this. His son is always sick. His wife desperately wants to get off this planet. This stinking planet. Which is what she herself has been pushing for. She is so complicit in all of this, and despite the fact that she's trying to come across as the reasonable one, she is just as bad of a parent as he is, for almost essentially the same reason. There's a lot of implication in this one tiny scene that their son is literally ill from being on this planet, that this garrison has been causing them and their family life tremendous issues, hassles, and tension, to the point where it's all frustrating for everyone involved, which is making all of them worse, which then makes them push back against everyone else. The system makes everyone worse. Doesn't matter which position in the cog machine you are. It doesn't matter where you are in the gearbox. There's no music at this point in the episode. There hasn't been for quite a while. And of course, the troopers are all distracted by the show, light and sound, which of course gives the other team, the damn team time, the Valley team, excuse me, time to infiltrate. Notice, by the way, a little tidbit here. The part of the plan we heard was on Cassian's end, the part that's going to go wrong. The part that we didn't hear was her plan, which goes pretty much according to plan, right? Except still wrong. They also, can I just say, I'm really sick and tired of how these people will not stop talking about the stench. Just, really? Yeah, Vel starts to freak out a little bit. They trade the furs. There's some implications there. Vel stalls. She starts to freak out. She starts to lose her nerve because she knows that this is it and that this is the line right here. Everyone is quite literally waiting for her signal. They're probably seconds away from calling off the heist. And in the leadership position, she starts to crumble. But then she calls it in. Gordon mistranslates. I actually mentioned this earlier. There's another little interesting... There's another interesting little tidbit. Implication, it doesn't even matter. The Commandant has been talking up the engineer, a colonel, I think is how he called him, the entire trip. Of course he has, because he's trying to get them repositioned, reassigned to another post, because that's what his wife wants. I mentioned that because we see that. We see that in his actions, in his operations, constantly sucking up the boss. When they start off down at the camera's down at the base of the hill where they've just traded the first, which the guy burns, and he starts talking to the colonel, and then we cut away and we jump around and we see Vel and we see the group and they walk up and it's cool. And as they're going in the building, he's still talking. We don't know what he's saying. We don't care. It doesn't matter. He has been schmoozing the colonel the entire trip up a hill. That guy. Really think about that, because it says a lot about how much he is pushing for this, probably to the point of desperation. He even asked earlier Gorn's impressions of the colonel, if you remember that. So Gorn walks them in, actually rewards his men by getting them out of the way. And there's this absolutely weird moment where the Commandant is weirdly sincere. You know, as they're talking about this, as they go loud, they kill the colonel, the only guy they kill, and they're trying to get him. He's constantly pleading with them. You don't understand. I can't open the stupid thing. I can't do it all. I don't have access. I don't have the codes. Stop lying to me. I'm not lying. He can't help himself, but constantly responding to them, and he doesn't respond with the "you rebel scum" kind of tone that I was expecting. There's a weird sincerity to what he's saying. And even when they finally go ahead and get him locked up and tie up his son and wife, who we'll come back to that in a minute, there's this bit where Vel tells him to shut up. He, of course, does not listen to her. Remember, one of Vel's go-to strategies is to just yell at people and tell them to shut up, and it almost never works. And he responds to her. She's like, you know, this is going to be a thing. If you do anything wrong, if you do this or this, we'll kill these people. And he says, oh, you'll kill us all anyways. And she can't help but respond to that. The rebel in her, the moralist in there, cannot help but respond to that. It's the only time her tone changes in the entire speech. She's got this thing right here, which is talking about it in just to say it. But the moment he says that, she just twitches around. Go that, because that's what you do, isn't it? And she shifts her tone because she can't help herself but let that seethe in, because that's what you do, isn't it? And then she actually gets calm, because now there's a bit more certainty. You know what that feels like, right? You ever been in a debate? Not a formal debate, although some of you probably have. But just a debate with someone online or someone in person. And there's that moment where you realize that you're right. I know that sounds weird, but you know what I mean, don't you? When you realize, oh, yeah, no, I got this. And she calms down. No, unlike you, we're going to let everyone go as soon as we leave. Remember that for a minute from now. Yeah, and yeah, the fact that the rebels are actively pointing a gun very close to a child, I don't have much else to add to that. So, they go to the vault. That is an insane amount of money. Don't even really need to actually see just exactly how... we don't need the concepts of the currency. We don't need to actually see the specifics. That's a giant freaking chunk of change. They only get a relatively small portion of it. If you look at the vault as they're leaving when their things start to go badly, they've only gotten maybe like a quarter of it. It's 80 million credits. Yeah, just a drop. Boop. There you go. That's a rounding error. You know what that is in an Imperial budget sheet? An 8. Or a 0.8. Yeah, 80 million, that's barely a quarter. Holy crap. Now, of course, things have been going wrong in general. And then I love the fact, I actually, in my notes earlier, I called him Corporal Stinkface. He's the guy who complained about the stink in the last episode. So naturally, Corporal Stinkface is the spanner here. It's just another one of those wonderful themes for this franchise, isn't it? The whole franchise, really, but especially Andor. Spanners in the work. So despite the fact that we've left the quiet tense moment, everything is just as tense. There's loud movement, lots of action in the camera usage. The cameras are actually being held by people rather than doing static shots and trolleys. Everything is much more dynamic, and it's still just as tense. Everything is just as tense as it was before. There's singing, there's yelling, there's movement, there's Corporal Stinkface who's figuring out what's going on, and then there's the eye. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. That's freaking pretty right there, and very Star Wars, very fantastical, very mystical looking. I'll give you that one episode. That is probably outside the budget of a television show, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, I know, right? With our Skeen's actor, all the actors just nail it. It's kind of crazy. What will happen to the locals? Oh, they're dead. Isn't that the point? I still don't know that. The Commandant is legitimately shocked when he finds out that Gorn is a traitor. Legitimately angry. It's the first time. He's been reasonable and quiet, trying to talk his way through these people this entire time. And the first time he actually gets angry at all is when he sees Gorn. And he actually flat out says, "You'll hang. You'll hang for this." Like he's obviously having trouble catching his breath because he's being overworked, hauling very heavy chunks of metal. But still, Gorn's response, 7 years serving you? I deserve worse than that. So, those iconic klaxons, that sound design. And they're ferrying up the TIEs. And it wasn't one TIE fighter, it's 3. A full flight. This says so much without meaning to. How many of you know anything about how Star Wars structures its squadrons? 3 to a flight, 12 to a squadron, 72 to a wing. Each wing is attached to a group. Each group is attached to a sector group. Yes, I know this by memory. Shut up. Stop making fun of me. This says so much. Because it says how piddling and pathetic this outpost really is to the Empire. Most Imperial outposts have a bare minimum of like 5 wings of fighters on hand. You go to an actual spaceport or a construction yard or anybody they care about, they have dozens of wings, an entire sector group ready to go. This place has 1 flight. 3 TIEs. This is just some stupid little backwater. And yet, 3 TIEs, and I said this earlier, is an existential threat. I'm sorry, Robostall, I apologize. I didn't mean to take away from it. Thank you, Diesel Edge, very, very much. Why would they need anything else? That's the point! That's the exact point! I've said it before and I'll say it again. If there's one thing I really like about the AU, it's that they've done a really, really good job of emphasizing the tiers of existence. Actually, it is, Lunaruth. You were quite correct. They have an entire hangar bay. That hangar bay's only purpose, really, is servicing those 3 TIEs. That's expensive. Look up how much a jet fighter costs in real life sometime. Now realize that that's a piddling amount of expense compared to the mechanics necessary to repair it, the expert technicians who have to maintain and upkeep that thing, the pilots, plural, because you gotta have the backup pilots, whose job it is to fly the damn things, all the repair parts, then you have to have the supplies. You have to have supply lines run to get new parts coming in, because you're not going to have everything you need on hand. You have to have power supplies, you have to have lines, you have to have converters. The sheer amount of time and effort that is put into maintaining a mere 3 TIEs is not insubstantial, which is sort of the point. And yeah, the payday is over in this dinky little frickin' dam, this nobody-nothing spot. And yeah, the whole plan hinges around removing the threat of 3 TIE fighters. God, I love that. I love that so much. So, the Commandant dies from a heart attack. The trooper takes that as a sign to open fire. Gorn. That one actually hurt. I liked Gorn, and I liked Gorn a lot. He's the kind of person we need more of. Excuse me. In real life, we need more people like that, man. I mean that. Not that he was perfect or anything like that, but, you know. So the firefight commences. Shooting. Barely being able to pull back. Yeah, blasters go off, people starts dying. Speaking of which, then we lost Harriman. We lost the officer and we lost the stormtrooper. Don't think I didn't notice that. And if I'm even close... I didn't realize they were black. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That probably says something about me. But the two Imperials was what I was drawing attention to. The ex-stormtrooper and the current lieutenant. If I'm even close to right about what Luthen's actually after here, these two people just died starting a tiny little pebble that is going to culminate in the destruction of the Galactic Empire and the death of Emperor Palpatine. And I'm not even being hyperbolic when I say that. So the ship starts to get off, hang on, and Cassian says hang on. And the problem here is I'm not sure anyone really understood what he was saying by that. Did you catch that? How many of you have ever been in something that rather suddenly accelerates? I have. I can attest to what that feels like. You don't understand if you haven't been in it. I know that sounds strange because I'm calling people out. But what I mean by that is some of you understand that lurch, right? That, like if you're just holding on like this, you're going to go flying. You need to be more like this in order to actually get going, right? You need to be braced. And yet everyone there is just like this. All they're doing is just like holding on like this is a freaking tram ride or something. And Nemec is gripping the payroll, which is not secured. Oh, God. I've never experienced that one, Maverick. Hopefully I never will, but yeah, I can imagine. So he says, hang on. Nobody does. And we all knew Nemec. Yeah, I'm actually broken up about this. We all knew Nemec was going to die. We heard the klaxons. There were angels over there doing their thing. Like, that comes down there. I'm sorry, that man, the moment we see that, his rib cages are crushed. He mentions he can't feel his legs. How many of you caught what that means? And I'm just going to go and lay that out. Because what that means is he just lost his spine. So, there's this really good scene. There's this really good scene where, you know, they try to get him together because they need him. They need the navigator for their lines. He pulls out the thing, starts working with it. What's he say? What's he say to do? Climb. Cassian questions him. Climb! One more question, because everything about Cassian's portrayal is necessary, because it's clear and obvious that what Cassian the pilot is saying, is that if I climb, we're all dead. He reiterates it 3 times. Climb! Cassian believes him. Cassian trusts him. Climbs. And then when he says dive, dives without hesitation. When he gets his call line, he goes without hesitation. The only person of this crew that he trusts. We've seen this type of trust. Cassian has portrayed this before in this very show. We show how much he trusts Bix. She's the only one he told about the murder, other than his mother. You remember that? He also went out of his way to warn Brasso, his friend. It's the only person he reached out to say. So he trusts him. Trusts him with his life. They get out. Let's be clear about this. These people get extraordinarily lucky to escape 3 TIE fighters. That's the thing. Did you catch that? Those 3 TIEs weren't just like some vague threat. They were probably a few seconds away from just being blown out of the sky. Just boop, and that's it. From 3 TIE fighters. They were right. to be afraid of those ships. And that's the point. When you build up a threat like that, you have to pay it off. You have to make it clear why they were so afraid of it. Too often fiction does this thing where it's like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. And then they just roll through it and they're fine. And it's like, well, what was the buildup for? Right? They do that. The fiction does it with characters, it does it with technologies, it does it with specific forces or ships or whatever. But in this case, these 3 ties very nearly killed them all. Payoff. And then... Yeah, no kidding, Rax. We're not to Skeen yet. Hang on. Because then we see Cinta, who has left the garrison, and is out here with the other people. Cinta? Where's the family? They can't show that on camera. They can't. But they also don't need to. Skeen and... God. Vel have an argument. Yeah, stormtroopers murder her whole family. No, there's no discussion here. They have an argument. We have a doctor. It was part of the backup plan. We need to go and we need to get him to a doctor. She's arguing no, we shouldn't. Cassian's the pilot, so ironically, it is actually his call. And once again, we see that theme of leadership. Did you catch that? Vel continues to not be a good leader. I'm really not trying to be hard on her. It's just part of her character. She isn't a good leader. She's still trying to figure out how to be a leader. She fails miserably at convincing Skeen and then Cassian. Both of which are like, no, we're going to the freaking doctor. Skeen obviously is rather mercenary here, but you get the very strong vibe, at least I do, that he cared about Nemec pretty much the same way that Cassian did, and probably for the exact same reason. Quick sidebar. The practical effects on selling the 4-armed doctor are actually really, really well done. All things considered. Like, I'm actually impressed. It's hard. I can even tell you exactly how they did it. They've got someone who's essentially laying on a braced, what do they call them? Like a step ladder. Like this. And he's actually like this, acting like, you know, just being the upper arms. And then you've got someone else who's up here like this, being the lower arms. And they do a really good job because that trick won't work if the camera like tilts to the side a little. But the camera, you notice the camera is always right up close or from a distance straight on, so you only see the effect. It's a good effect. Very good. Huge props on that. Yeah, it's almost entirely a perspective trick, but it's a smart one. I just wanted to give praise to that while we're there. So then Skeen, he says, luck drives the whole damn galaxy, doesn't it? And first of all, yeah, can confirm. You might say it's the Force, but honestly, I'm kind of with Han Solo. There's a lot of luck in this setting. But the moment he says that, I realized where he was going with this. Question. Do you think it was always his plan to sell everyone else out and bail? Or do you think this was impromptu? Gorn, Terramin, Himmick. I think it was always an option. I do. I think this was something he planned out. But I think that the way that went pretty much locked down where he wanted this to go. That's just my take. We'll never know. I don't have a brother. That line hit so hard. That line was so powerful. 40 million apiece. Don't tell me you haven't thought about it. I can't fly, but I have a safe spot to go to. You're just like me. We're born in a hole, and all we know is climbing over someone else to get out. That line is the Galactic Empire in one sentence. Right there. And Cassian's been there. More than once, actually. That line says so much about so many. And Cassian, in that moment, it's funny. Cassian has this recurring thing. This is true in Rogue One as well. That once he makes up his mind, once he makes a decision, he commits pretty much immediately. There's no hesitation. There's no waiting for the right moment. He picks up his gun and he shoots Skeen to death. Hesitates a second. And then makes a call. He goes in, and naturally Vel thinks he's betraying them. But he's not. He lays things out so flatly. Skeen sold you out. I'm taking what's owed me and nothing more. Here's the Kyber crystal back to give to Luthen. I'll pay you 30,000 for your ship. That is extremely reasonable. And I think pretty much Vel is obviously in a little bit of a mental state right now, but I think as she starts to realize what he's doing, she realizes that he's not actually selling them out. That he's not bailing in the traditional sense of the word. It's probably why she insisted he take the manifesto. Yeah, this isn't screwing them over. He probably means this. Yeah, exactly, Huthor. Gradient, right? He is bailing. He's out. He's probably seen far too much in the last few days that he never wanted to see before. But he's not screwing them over. It's not the kind of person he is. He is not like Skeen. And I feel that anger is there, right? That need to prove it. That he is not Skeen. That he's not going to take that payday. And he's not going to screw these people over. I have suspected Skeen was going to be the person to screw them over for a while now. I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you for a second. Because I actually had two suspects for this, for the traitor. Because I was a traitor in a heist thing, right? I thought it was either to be Terraman, because, not actually because of the next Stormtrooper thing, actually, just because of his leanings and how harsh he comes down. And the other one was Skeen. He's just such a perfect fit for this. He's too pragmatic. He really is the kind of thing that Cassian could be, and honestly was on a perfect path to become. It's very likely that if not for one stupid incident with two bullies, and then one completely overzealous deputy, and then one desperate rebel insider, there's a really good chance that Cassian would just be like Skeen. And I really do feel like Cassian recognizes that and hates it. Then we cut to the ISB. This is not a meeting. No one is going home. Tell your staff and families. I want your planetary retaliation plans in the building for presentation by midnight. Immediate cut to Mon Mothma on the Senate floor. Oh my god. This is such a perfect scene. It's so small, but news of this dinky little nobody nothing has just hit the Senate floor. Please think about that for 5 seconds. But the other thing about that, did you notice how many of those senatorial seats were empty? Mon Mothma was giving a speech to virtually no one. Obviously, some of those people were then left after they received the news. They went to go deal with that. But there's nobody there to begin with. And do you know what that reminds me of? And I don't want to compare the United States government to the Galactic Empire, but here we are. Have you ever seen any of those speeches that senators or congresspeople give? And they get in front of the thing, and there's like, camera's nice up front, right? And there's a podium, and they're sitting there, and they got a mic, and here they are, you know, giving their speech, and getting all fired up, and looking like she's talking to people or he's talking to people. How many of you have been there physically present for any of those little speeches they give? Because there's nobody there. It's almost funny the way they do it. You ever go to this? I've been to the Senate floor physically in person. It's empty. There's no one there. There's nobody there. They're talking to the camera. That's all they're doing. They're just talking to the camera. Now, there's some legality behind that because that makes it part of a formal presentation, which gets logged in certain parts of the digital library, as well as being presented to certain aspects of public television, as well as privatized television. But that's normal. That's what happens. And I just could not help but get that image out of my head, because when I physically visited DC, which I've done, and we went in there, we had a whole tour. I don't even know if they offer these anymore. We had a whole tour to go in and watch, and there was some dude who I didn't even recognize down there who was just giving the whole speech to a camera, and there was nobody there except for us, the tourists, watching. And that image has stuck with me for, God, 20 years? No, longer than that. That would have been 2002, give or take. 2001 or 2002. So obviously this has been a minute. Oh, wow, Bregman. Yeah, sometimes they're in full attendance. It's not like you see in the movies. I'm sorry, getting back on topic. Even Mothma stops her speech to go look at the news. And then it cuts to Luthen. There's a dead language, blah, blah. Everything from Altani. What? What do you mean? Well, I might have something in the back. And I love that Luthen, we know so much about Luthen based on how he reacts to things. We know he is so invested that he needs to get away from everyone else, go to his little safe spot, just so he can laugh. Just so he can have that emotional release of actually having done it. And then the whole episode ends on him exhaling, letting out a breath he's probably been holding for several days now. God, Skarsgård is so good! He's so good! Purple. I'm sorry. I told you before. If you have to think about it, it probably isn't. That's a lot of how this works. You generally know a lamentation and a purple just like that. Oh, he doesn't know they succeeded. He doesn't need to know they succeeded. News has spread. I mean, obviously he's not fully aware of what's happening in the Senate floor yet. But he doesn't need to, does he? He probably doesn't even care how many people got out of that alive. Or if he cares, it's not something that's his top priority. Better way to put that. God damn. Yeah, the fact that some random dude reading God, I forget what they're actually called. There's a term. Scandoc, I think? Just reading some Scandoc. Alright, here's the deal. The next episode is a standalone. Do we cover it now or do we cover it tomorrow? Because one way or another, we're covering it as part of another block. I'm good. Let me actually see how long it is. It is 45 minutes long. So that's going to take us just a little under an hour to get through the episode, and then however long after that to talk about. I've got the time. Might be a little late for dinner, but I got the time. I feel we should do it now. I really do. We're in the vibe, we're in the mode, and it'll leave the arc to dedicating the next arc to tomorrow, right? Just Chakung, start fresh. That feels right. That feels right. So let's do that. Let's commit to that. I'm going to go ahead and chop off and get started on the next episode.